This dragon is overweight. But how can you determine if your dragon is overweight? Today we're going to look at some exact metrics that you can use to spot obesity in your dragon. I'm Ethan, and you're watching Radiant Reptilia. So today we're going to be looking at obesity in bearded dragons. If you are in the market for a bearded dragon that isn't obese, feel free to check out the iCard in the corner to see what reptiles Radiant Reptilia currently has available. So you've heard of first world problems. This is what I like to call a first world rescue, an animal whose only issue is that he has been horribly overfed. Unfortunately, this is a growing problem with bearded dragons because they are one of the reptiles that doesn't necessarily show a ton of self-control with their dietary habits. They will typically eat just about everything you throw at them. So if you are worried that your bearded dragon might be obese, here's 5 little details about your bearded dragon's anatomy that you can use to determine if your bearded dragon might be overweight. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is your dragon's abdomen or abdominal fat. Here in front of me, this is a dragon that is perfectly healthy weight. If you look at the stomach flab of this dragon, it's very lean down here. It squishes a little bit, but you're not really seeing a ton of loose hanging globs of fat. Switching over to our obese bearded dragon, we can really see a huge difference here. There's so much loose material in the belly of this dragon. It's just huge globs and chunks. You can really feel all the fat pockets and fat sacs just kind of gathered over there. Even when this dragon is really perked up, like he is right here, you can see all his fat is still sagging and dragging across the table because there is so much that it's really just weighing him down and hanging down with so much elasticity. Moving on to the second detail in determining if your bearded dragon is overweight or not, we can take a look at your bearded dragon's tail. This is our healthy bearded dragon again. The tail is really just a dense, compact structure. It's not like a leopard gecko tail where it's literally a fat store, or it's not supposed to be at least. And really there's not too much mobility of the scales. They're very fixed in place, and the tail as a whole just feels very dense and solid. Moving back to our more obese dragon and looking at his tail, we can see that the base of his tail is actually a lot thicker and a lot beefier, and if you feel it, it actually feels squishy. This means there's a thin layer of fat literally surrounding the entire surface of the tail. This is really not good because this means that your bearded dragon has so much excess fat that it's needing to distribute it across the surface of the tail, which really should just be a compact structure used for balance. Next, we're going to take a look at the fat pads behind your bearded dragon's forearms, which is their front arms or their front legs. Now, this bearded dragon doesn't actually have any fat pad back there. And that's, again, because this bearded dragon is a healthy weight. So if you lift up your dragon's forearm, you really don't want to be seeing anything hanging out behind the arm of the dragon. So there's not much to see on our healthy bearded dragon. So let's go ahead and jump over to the very obese one. Taking a look under the obese dragon's forearms, and we can actually see these very prominent kind of sacs or lumps behind the arms, and they're very squishy to the touch. This is what we call a fat pocket. It's essentially just a storage site for surplus fat. In the wild, if a bearded dragon was going through a time when there was a ton of food and it was really able to fatten up, so that when it goes into a time where there's maybe less food available, it can actually use up some of that energy instead of actually hunting for itself. In captivity though, when we always should have food available for our animals, this is just a sign of consistent overfeeding, and really just not a good sign for your dragon's health in general. So if you're not familiar with what a jowl is the loose hanging skin and sort of tissue matter that kind of hangs underneath the chin, kind of right below the section that's usually known as the beard. This bearded dragon has mild jowls, just a little bit of some loose tissue hanging down there and sagging down there, and that's okay. You want to have a little bit of tissue down there. If you don't have any, that could actually be a sign that your dragon is underweight or the opposite direction, but you really don't want it to be huge and massive like we'll see on our obese dragon. Look at this dragon's chin. This dude is ridiculous. There is so much tissue and glob down there. I can feel it. It feels like mayonnaise or something. It's really, really gross. There's really 3 distinct wads or masses underneath the chin of this dragon, one on each side and then one straight down the middle. All of them are really full of fat and way bigger than they should be in a bearded dragon that is a healthy weight. Lastly, we can come to my personal favorite, which is the fat pads on your bearded dragon's head. So you may have noticed these before. These are really just the little squishy patches right kind of behind the eyes of your bearded dragon. Again, just like so many of the things in this video, this is really just a storage for excess fat. In the wild, they would be storing excess fat here in times of plenty so that they could use it in times of less food You do want to feel a little bit of squish there. If there's nothing there at all and it's just hard, crusty tissue, then that means your bearded dragon is either severely dehydrated or severely underweight. So you do want to feel them a little bit, but you really don't want them to be prominent or necessarily huge. Switching over one last time to our very large bearded dragon, we don't even need to feel the fat pads to identify them. You can actually see them just looking at your bearded dragon from the side. They are massive. They're like the size of his eyeballs. This is one of the most prominent ways that you can determine obesity in a bearded dragon, even from looking at it from afar, just because they are so huge. So if you are noticing large fat pads that are very soft and very full, sort of like a large pimple, then that definitely could be an indicator that your bearded dragon is an obese animal. So there you have it. There's 5 different anatomical factors you can look at to see if your bearded dragon might be overweight. Before I get into some of the details about how we can really solve this issue, please note that each bearded dragon is going to have different builds, and your bearded dragon at a healthy weight might look a little bit different than my bearded dragon at a healthy weight, and that's really where the beauty of having 5 different determining factors comes in, because if your bearded dragon has really big fat pads, but there's no fat pockets behind the arms, and the base of its tail is fine, and all the other factors are really checking out, then you might not need to worry. But if 3 or 4 of these factors are really looking like your bearded dragon is severely overweight, then you really have a reason for concern. So it's really just important to be looking at all of the factors and then coming to a conclusion about your bearded dragon's health status, as opposed to just looking at 1 or 2. So, since I've determined that this bearded dragon is overweight, before it can go up on the site, we really need to get him down to a healthy weight, so one of you guys can buy him as a healthy dragon. And there's really 2 factors that are going to go into that process, the first being dietary change, and the second being activity change or exercise. With this dragon's diet, a couple different things are going to be happening. As far as his protein levels, overall, they're going to be decreasing, so he's going to be getting less insects than I would usually feed an adult bearded dragon, just because protein is one of the biggest factors that's going to lead to your bearded dragon gaining and maintaining its weight. Instead, he'll be getting a lot more plant matter, specifically greens and fibrous plant matters, that really are a lot more work for his body to digest. This way, at the same time that he's digesting nutritious foods, he's also burning off calories. When it comes to the protein that this animal is going to be getting, it's not going to be anything fatty like waxworms or hornworms, stuff I might give as an occasional treat for other dragons. This dragon is going to be missing out on. Talking about insects, this is a great segue into the second topic, which is exercise or activity levels. When I do feed him insects, I don't just throw him in a bowl for him to grab. If he's up on his basking perch on one end of the enclosure, I'll throw an insect on the other end of the enclosure and make sure he sees it and have him walk all the way over there to actually eat his food. Additionally, I'm making sure to handle this dragon a little bit more and get him out of his enclosure a little bit more than any of the other dragons. So I try to pull this guy out almost every time I come over and feed the dragons and let him roam around and just get some exercise and experience being out and about. Now we've learned how to identify if your bearded dragon is obese. If you want to learn more about bearded dragon care, I have a complete care guide, which you can check out with the iCard in the corner. And this bearded dragon, which is the healthy one and doing great, is currently up on the site. So if you're looking for a bearded dragon, this could be the one for you. And this one, after he's made some progress in his weight and obesity, this one will be able to go up on the site as well. I'm Ethan, we've been learning about bearded dragon weight, and you've been watching Radiant Reptilia.